Alrighty, I'm going to start in a minute. Hi, everyone. Welcome to TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, and as always on Discord. For those of you who want to join there, how is everybody doing? I hope you are all well. On Twitch and YouTube, the title may be wrong today because I'm a silly goose and I forgot to change it. But yeah, how's everyone doing? I hope you're all well. Welcome to a new week of reading. Thank you so much, Sean. Today's goal is a lot higher than usual because I have got to do stuff that takes my accounts out of the red because my bank account is in the red. So yeah, the goal is 175. Please, if you can, any little bit helps. That would be really, really, really helpful. And yeah, let us begin. We started chapter 6 last week, and this is an interview in the US in 2004, and talking about the elections that were both happening in the US and in India at the time. And talking about the kind of policies that are created around certain parties. I mean, you have parties that stand for one thing, you have parties that stand for another, whatever the case may be. However, you have to look at what they're actually saying, not what they're reacting to, and not how they present themselves, but their actual policies. When you look at the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, their policies are very much similar. It's just that with the Democratic Party, it's painted with a black square and the pride flag in June. But you cannot say that they're the same party because internally it is harm reduction. Internally for the US, the Democrats, voting for the Democrats is harm reduction. But when it comes to international affairs and foreign policy, it is pretty much the same. Look at how the big beautiful bill has affected people, and think about all of the tiny little bills that the Democrats have been introducing that led up to and enabled the big beautiful bill to happen, not codifying. Exactly. Like Roe v. Wade was not codified by the Democrats when they could have. Love, I have a mug here. Roe v. Wade was not codified when it could have been. The Supreme Court was taken over by Republican candidates because of the Democrats' failings. The road was paved for the big beautiful bill through a lot of, thank you so much. Thank you so much, JJ. The road was paved for the big beautiful bill by all of these little things, inactions and actions by the Democrats. So we see that, what was it? I was thinking of just now. Minimum wage. Minimum wage should increase with inflation, and it's still been stuck at what, $7.25 most states. I'm a baby Kiara. I love you. And when you have either good, it's $7.25 still. For how long has it been $7.25? The Democrats could have instituted policy that increases minimum wage with, federalizes minimum wage and then increases it with inflation proportionally in terms of like percentage of profit made in that time, or, you know, something that could have empowered people. But no, the Democrats, who claim to stand for the people, instead of the church or whatever, the evangelical church, didn't do that. So it's democratic inaction that paved the way for something like the Big Beautiful Bill. Biden was too busy waging war on Palestine to follow through with canceling student debt. Since 2009, geez, that is 17 years. That is 17 freaking years. And Kiara, I hope that you are enjoying your holiday. And thank you so much, JJWs to JJ. Wait, that's wrong. No, that is wrong. My maths is terrible. What? Oh, right. There. I have to do maths on my fingers. Thank you. Before it was like 6, geez. But the same thing happened in India, where the Congress party paved the way for the BJP to take power, and to essentially, what they're trying to do is criminalize Islam in India. That is what they're trying to do. They did nothing to help the situation. And yes, I know I'm rambling. Okay. In terms of challenging the system, what role does culture play in resistance? And this is important because culture plays a huge role in resistance. People who have a culture of resistance, people who have a culture of being able to safely critique their leaders. That is a healthy way of governance to function. And note, I say governance and not government. She says, I think we have to look out for what is being done to us. Among the major things that has been done is the slaughter of language. So now when you say democracy, it means neoliberal capitalism. When you say reform, it means repression. When you say empowerment and deepening democracy, I get scared. So what is it that we're going to do now? The whole thing. But you're all just against things. You're against globalization. You're against this. You're against that. But what are you for? This is not true. We are actually the people who believe in globalization. We actually believe in the globalization of nuclear treaties, in the signing of the Kyoto Protocol, the banning of chemical and biological weapons. We believe in the International Court of Justice. So where is the question of us being against everything? Being against something, just being against a whole lot of things doesn't mean that you don't stand for something. Being against fossil fuels means that I am for renewables. But the fact is that we also have to understand that as people, we can only keep power on a short leash if we are actually against incumbent power, if we are questioning it, if we are refusing its lies, if we are refusing the stories and histories of the victors. So in terms of culture, just a few years ago when I first wrote an essay on privatization and what it means, it ended with saying that what is happening to the world is just outside the realm of public understanding. And it is the duty and delight of writers and actors and singers and filmmakers and activists who bring this into the realm of public understanding so that we can see our corporeal enemy. Not our corporal enemy, corporeal. We can see the enemy and who they represent. Now, I started watching Andor. To me, the enemy is not a single person. The enemy is represented by certain people. The enemy in Andor is red tape. It's bureaucracy. It is the endless bureaucracy of people who do not want to slip out, who don't want to step outside the safety of the rules. That is the true enemy in Andor. Correct me if I'm wrong. Exactly. The enemy is the state itself. Every time I write something, I have to brace myself, in India anyway, for 3 weeks to a month of insults. But writers and artists, filmmakers and singers have done it. We know empire stands completely exposed, and we know who we are fighting. So that is a huge victory. And we can never undermine that. The important thing is now we must not allow symbolic resistance to replace real civil disobedience. And that is it. We cannot allow it. Thank you so much. Lovey, can you take the other mug, please? Thank you. I always say, yes, do the symbolic thing. Absolutely do the symbolic thing. But civil disobedience is what is absolutely necessary. The theatrical part of resistance is important, yes, but it becomes meaningless if it's the only part. I know millions of people marched against the war on the 15th of February, and the war didn't stop. They just said it didn't help, so what's the point of doing anything? Civil disobedience is what actually works. Exactly. After we finish this question, then I'll tell you something about the resistance campaign. I know millions of people marched, It didn't help, so what's the point of doing anything? Like people are saying, Trump didn't step down after no kings, so what's the point? Of course he's not going to. You think a despot is going to give up power? We can't stop a war with a weekend march. To stop empire from moving forward the way it does, soldiers have to refuse to fight. People have to refuse to load their weapons. The alternative media has to be listened to. We have to expose mainstream press for the boardroom bulletin that it is, and then start ignoring it or laughing at it or reading between the lines so that we use their power against them. And that's what all of us who are campaigning do. Pacifica and Alternative Radio and Democracy Now! Are doing such a huge service, not to just this country, but to the world. I'll read you just this one page. It was the end of this talk called Confronting Empire. What can we do? We can hone our memory, learn from our history. We can continue to build public opinion until it becomes a deafening roar. We can turn the war on Iraq into a fishbowl of US government excesses. We can expose Bush and Blair and their allies for the cowardly baby killers, water poisoners, and, I hate this word, pusillanimous long-distance bombers that they are. Pusillanimous. We can reinvent civil disobedience in a million different ways. In other words, we can come up with a million ways of becoming a collective pain in the ass. When Bush says, you're either with us or you are with terrorists, we can say, no, thank you. We can let him know that the people of the world do not need to choose between a malevolent Mickey Mouse and mad mullahs. Our strategy should not only be to confront empire, but to lay siege to it, to deprive it of oxygen, to shame it, to mock it, with our art, music, literature, stubbornness, joy, our sheer brilliance and relentlessness, and our ability to tell our own stories. Stories that are different from the ones that we are being brainwashed to believe. The corporate revolution will collapse if we refuse to buy what they are selling. Their ideas, their version of history, their wars, their weapons, their notion of inevitability. Remember this, we be many and they be few. We need us more than we need them. There is an alternative to terrorism, and that alternative is called justice. And the fact is, no amount of nuclear weapons, daisy cutters, full spectrum dominance is going to be able to control this, because as much as there are people who wish ascendancy, who wish to be the most powerful people on earth, their urge will be matched with a greater intensity by people who only want to live with dignity. So that battle will be joined. That battle will be waged. Whether it's a beautiful battle, whether it's a bloody battle, depends on us, but it will be joined. This is something that I've read countless times to people. And that quote ends with one of my favorite lines she has ever written. Another world is possible. In fact, she is on her way, and on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. So I want to tell you about a campaign that was waged during apartheid. And yes, I have read that many, many, many times to people. The reason that I read that quote in particular is because it shows the importance of collective action. And not just the importance of collective action as how we see it, like with protests and strikes and marches and whatnot, but collective action of refusal. Starbucks lost billions, literal billions of dollars because of boycotts. South Africa's regime changed because of boycotts. And I want to tell you about the 1952 Defiance Campaign. Well, it started in 1946. The Passive Resistance Campaign was led by the South African Indian Congress. Yes, absolutely. That is why communism is needed. The Passive Resistance Campaign was led by the Indian Congress in response to what was called the Ghetto Act of 1946, that segregated and restricted Indian land ownership in Natal, which then became KwaZulu-Natal, which is where Durban is, because it was said, Indian people, after being freed from their indenture, cannot own anything. And in 1952, the Defiance of Unjust Laws campaign, or the Defiance campaign, was jointly launched by the South African Indian Congress and the African National Congress. The African National Congress is in power today. And I'm very, very proud that my grandfather was one of the founding members of the Indian Congress. Volunteers actively and peacefully broke past laws and curfews, flooding prisons to draw global attention to apartheid. And then in 1955, the Congress of the People, where all of these different groups like the ANC, the South African Indian Congress, and a whole lot of other diverse groups, gathered in a place called Kliptown in Johannesburg to adopt the Freedom Charter, which declared that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. All who live in it. So the Defiance campaign led to the adopting of the Freedom Charter. This is how powerful small acts can be. What they did, and this is, my grandfather also took part in this, sitting on benches that said whites only, going to stores that were reserved for white people only, getting kicked out of buses that were reserved for white people only. This was 1952. And my grandmother, the quiet, peaceful woman that she was, tiny, like people used to refer to my grandmother as having a mouse voice. She was so tiny voice. And she was at the forefront of this campaign in her district. She's incredible. And thank you for the update, B. Spain scored again. Spain is 2-0 up against France. Cheers to Spain. But these can lead up to far bigger things. When people know what human rights should look like, what people should have, the basic things that people should have, like a living wage, clean water, access to food without having to work, access to housing, access to healthcare, access to education. When we look at all of these things in tiny little pockets and we come together, we can build a freedom charter that is for the people. We can agree that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. We can agree that housing is a basic human right, that water and food are basic human needs and they're basic human rights. Israel just voted at the UN against queer people having access to healthcare, to HIV healthcare. And they decide, hey, we're going to pinkwash this whole ass thing. And I'm so fucking tired. Because they're like, oh, Israel is the only country friendly to the LGBT in the Middle East. No, they just voted against queer people having access to HIV medication. No. Yep, it really does happen every single year. The US and Israel voted against, I'll explain pinkwashing just now. The US and Israel voted against food being a basic human right. Pinkwashing. Okay, let's get into pinkwashing. I'm going to read you something that I wrote last year, year before, I'm thinking. No, the year before. And it's a little long. It's about 2 pages. So I'm going to... No, it's not 2 pages. It's 4 pages. So I'm going to be... So listen closely. When confronted by Zionists and their allies, a common refrain I hear is the assertion that women's rights are non-existent in Palestine. To them, I offer a single retort. Women's rights mean nothing to women who are dead. Allow me to present some stark realities. A 31-year-old woman died of blood poisoning after being detained and denied an abortion, despite the inevitability of a miscarriage. This tragedy did not unfold in Palestine, but in Ireland. Similarly, over 64,000 pregnancies resulting from rape occurred between 2022 and 2024, where a blanket ban on abortion persists without exception for cases of rape. This is not Palestine, but the United States. Domestic abuse reports surge by alarming percentages based on the performance of the national football team. This is not Palestine. This is England. Sexual violence increased in this country by 36.19% since 2020, with the incidence of incestual child rape being the highest, which the government has not recognized as a crime. Less than 10% of reported rape within this army has been taken to court. That is not Palestine. That is Israel. These instances of violations against women's rights are not confined to places like Palestine, but are global. It would be disingenuous to defend Palestine by denying the existence of gender-based violence within its borders. Absolutely. Palestinian women, femmes, and girls endure discrimination and rights violations within their society, entrenched by old patriarchal norms and power imbalances. Misconceptions about Islam often fuel external rhetoric, falsely portraying women as subservient, but the brutal realities of occupation, political violence, and human rights violations compound the plight of Palestinian women and femmes. Israeli police exacerbate gender inequalities with settlements, evictions, and blockades disproportionately affecting women and girls. In Gaza, the humanitarian crisis is exacerbated by Israeli restrictions on essential goods, including sanitary products and medical supplies. The fragmentation of the Palestinian territory hampers efforts to combat violence against women and restricts their political and economic participation. Palestinian women are not a monolithic group. Their experiences are shaped by intersecting identities and systemic barriers. While Palestinian activists and civil society organizations tirelessly advocate for women's rights, Israel perpetuates a false narrative of being a beacon of gender equality. Yet Israeli feminist groups are battling against regressive, judicial reforms that threaten women's legal rights. Israel pits itself against Palestine's great big boogeyman called Islam. perpetuating harmful stereotypes and disinformation, not just regarding women in Muslim society and that women have no rights, but the queer community. Saying that in Palestine they have no rights under Islamic law. However, patriarchy is a global phenomenon. The anti-LGBTQIAP is a global phenomenon, an epidemic, I would call it, where people's rights are minimal or even absent in almost every society. The insistence of the West to impose its own form of feminism and pinkwashing on the global South is not new. Civilizational feminism, as Françoise Vergès calls it in her book A Decolonial Feminism, much like white feminism, is resolute in upholding Western values as the only way to be a free woman. Just as France banned hijab in public, Israel's civilizational feminism describes expressions of feminism focusing on white or white-adjacent women only, but conveniently ignores that it is oppressing and killing all women in Palestine and all queer people in Palestine. Critiques of this white supremacy, or should I say white simulationism, as Israeli society is not all white, within feminist spaces have been and continue to be habitually resisted through pernicious performances of white feminist innocence. But it is also within Western feminist communities where racism and white dominance within progressive and radical politics have been most exclusively challenged. And let's be clear, it's women and femmes of color and queer folk, gender diverse folk, who have led and shaped this often fraught and emotionally exhausting work as part of advancing political frameworks which understand different oppressive systems as intersectional. The truth is, I dislike the women and children rhetoric. It's infantilizing and emotionally manipulative, ignoring the fact that men are also innocent victims of war. It presumes a natural feminine pacifism, but also it is women and children in Gaza who are suffering the most, in large part because most people in Gaza are either women or children, as a result of arrests and killings of men. It is women and girls who are the most likely to be raped in conflict, subjected to a particular kind of torture and humiliation designed to break souls and bodies. It is women and children who routinely make up the majority of the people who are called innocent, who are killed when men start fighting. It is women and girls who particularly suffer under fundamentalist patriarchal religions and governments. I'm looking at you, evangelism. And it is women and children who routinely do the least to foment and perpetuate violence and war, but nevertheless feel the heaviest consequences. It is being actively perpetrated by Israel on women, femmes, and gender diverse people in Palestine. And in many ways, while Israel maintains its supposed gender equality and LGBTQIA rights within its own society, it puts it against their propaganda. In the second month of the war in Gaza, 37,000 pregnant women were forced to give birth with no electricity or medical supplies, risking life-threatening complications without access to delivery and emergency obstetric care services, over and above the region's lack of access to medical services, depending on the whims of the occupier. The complete blockade of Gaza, announced on 10th of October 2023, prevented food, water, fuel, and medical supplies. It is a humanitarian crisis. UN research revealed that in approximately 30% of households, women and girls in the West Bank deliberately avoid areas such as colonial settlements, checkpoints, community spaces, markets, and public transportation due to feelings of insecurity. Queer people avoid these areas altogether for fear of being kidnapped. These statistics underscore the unequal impact of contextual factors on women, girls, and gender diverse people, a plight exacerbated by deeply entrenched patriarchal norms that persist in undermining their rights. Just last year, 5 Palestinian women were forced to strip by IOF soldiers in Hebron during a raid on an apartment building in the city. One of them was queer. The incident sparked outrage among Palestinians, with militant factions threatening response. According to the report, occupational soldiers raided a home of an Ajluni family in South Hebron and arrested the family's eldest son. Undoubtedly, the deplorable incident was not isolated and should be taken as deliberate settler colonial policy, especially when they arrest the breadwinner of the family. A Palestinian woman who was freed from detention said more than 15 fellow Palestinian women were raped by occupational interrogators to force them to confess to charges leveled against them and collaborate with the country's intelligence. This is done to queer people 10 times over. A woman I spoke to in 2017 says she was walking with her son when 2 members of the IOF cornered her and repeatedly raped her, calling her slurs and beating her continuously. Other officers stood around laughing and held her son down, making him watch his mother being brutalized in front of him. Years later, he committed suicide, asking his mother to join him in escaping what he described in his suicide letter as a place worse than hell. Palestinian women, femmes, and gender-diverse people, aside from being under the constant threat of death, face daily assaults by IOF soldiers. Women and queer detainees and prisoners are subjected to harassment, physical and verbal abuse, degrading body searches, rape and other sexual violations, solitary confinement and harsh or arbitrary punishment, all of which go unpunished or unacknowledged by the West. Instead, Israel and its lapdogs are milking the 7th of October attacks for every ounce of sympathy that they can garner, including weaponizing rape allegations to justify the ongoing genocide. The extensive New York Times so-called investigation exposed one thing, and you'll know which one I'm talking about: the extent to which Israel and its US-based allies, including the New York Times, would go to in order to see Palestine being buried under the rubble and the expansion of the Zionist project. Not only are they abusing feminism and LGBTQIA equality, but abusing the lives of their own women to further genocidal aims. I believe survivors. I don't believe genocidal regimes and their cohorts. What we do from here represents a pivotal shift in discourse surrounding gender equality and queer rights, emphasizing the need for systemic change on a global scale. We need to recognize Israel's harmful rhetoric and that the struggle for rights transcends cultural, national, and religious boundaries, highlighting the interconnectedness of gender oppression, including the effects of occupation, Western imperialism, and propaganda. Advocating for women's empowerment within the context of broader societal transformation includes halting human rights abuses against women and queer people. So far, since 7th October 2023, 951,490 women and girls have been displaced from their homes. 2 mothers are killed every hour in Gaza. A queer person is kidnapped by Israel every 4 days. 70% of those killed in Gaza have been women and children. Over 690,000 menstruating people in Gaza have limited, minimal, or no access to menstrual hygiene supplies or water. 180 pregnant women gave birth every single day without access to adequate medical care or facilities. Over 155,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women and femmes are facing an alarming rise in malnutrition rates and cannot breastfeed their children. Patriarchy is a global epidemic, pervasive in societies worldwide. We must recognize and confront this reality, acknowledging that the struggle for women's rights transcends borders. So let us stand in solidarity with Palestinian women, girls, femmes, and gender-diverse people, and all those fighting against gender-based violence and inequality, especially against the LGBT, which is being pinkwashed through Israel's propaganda machine. It is only through collective action and unwavering advocacy that we can create a world where women's rights are truly respected and upheld. I leave you with the words of one of my icons, Leila Khalid. Who planted terrorism in our area? Someone came and took our land, forced us to leave, forced us to live in camps. This is terrorism. using means to resist this terrorism and stop its effect, that is called struggle. From the river to the sea. And thank you, Twitch. I'll tell you just now. Yeah. Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Free Palestine. All day, every day. So yeah, that is essentially pinkwashing in a nutshell. The narrative that the Middle East is a hostile space for queer people and for women and femmes. That is pinkwashing, but that is the actual reality of queer and gender diverse people, women and femmes and girls in Palestine. They say the entire myth that queer people are thrown off roofs by Hamas, that's a lie. They were queer hangout spots in Gaza. They were. It's all been flattened by Israel. It really is always projection. So yeah, that was written in 2024, beginning of 2024. We had an event. So when we resist all of those, when we tell people the numbers, when we tell people the truth, when we tell people this is what is actually going on, like, yeah, of course, when a person is taken through for a tour of the best spots in so-called Israel, they're going to see no apartheid, just like a fish doesn't see water. But you go to Palestine, you go to Gaza, there's nothing left in Gaza. You go to the West Bank, you go to East Jerusalem, you'll see it. And you'll see it very, very starkly when you see people walking down the street and you see Israelis walking wherever they want. And Palestinians have to keep to the Palestinians or the Arab-only roads. Because they don't call them Palestinians. They call them Arabs. So, yes, we went off on a little bit of a tangent, but let's pick up where we left off here. He asks if on November 2nd there is a regime change in the US and Kerry replaces Bush. She cut him off right there. She said, that's not regime change. And then he continues. Exchanging ivory snow for tide. What might people do the next day? She says, don't let up. Don't miss a beat. Keep demanding what you've been demanding and don't be co-opted. Don't say, let's give this guy a little time, a few months, a couple of years. No. Because people are dying. The world is changing every day while cruise missiles are raining down on people. Contracts are being signed. Pipelines are being laid. Water and petrol and copper and nickel and gold and diamonds are being stolen from poor countries. So there isn't time. The poor, the people in the global south have no time. The rich have time, but the poor don't have time. We don't have time. And I thank you for it, JJ. Thank you so much. Because we don't have time. You talk about the cruise missile, but also three secretive organizations that essentially rule the world: the World Trade Organization, the IMF, and the World Bank. Time is expensive, exactly. If you haven't looked up Samuel Vime's boots theory, please do. Argentina is a kind of textbook example of how the checkbook operates. She says, I don't think there's a country on God's earth which isn't in the crosshairs of the IMF checkbook or the American cruise missile. So if the checkbook doesn't work, then the cruise missile will, because it's the nature of the beast, it's the nature of the capitalist machine that you have to extract more and more in order to make more and more profit. So that's the way in a way, the way the argument may never be won, because there will be those who throw their lot in with power. There are those who have a comfortable relationship with power, and this is what Geeky constantly talks about. Your comfort is oppressive because there are people who are comfortable with their relationship with power. They have these comfortable relationships because they benefit from the power structures that exist. So they won't say anything because they exist. Not in luxury, just within power, just within comfort. And having that comfortable relationship comes at the cost of everyone else. Yes. There are those who want dominance at the cost of justice. There are those who want justice. So that's why there has to be a struggle. And we're not going to win that struggle without paying a price. It's going to be a hard fight. And we do have a hard fight ahead of us. And that is why I am so proud to be standing side by side with all of you, figuratively, because I'm banned from your country, most of you. But I'm glad to be standing with you. Because if you are here right now and listening, it means we are comrades. Naomi Klein has said you come up with these killer one-liners. Indeed, you're masterful in terms of your craft and artistic and poetic command of language. The God of Small Things, the novel that won the Booker Prize, which now has sold 7 million copies and translated into 40 languages, is an example of that. I think it would be nice to close this evening with a reading from The God of Small Things, from The Goddess of Large Things, Arundhati Roy. And this takes us to the end of chapter 6, which is a good place to stop. And after this, Geeky is going to go live. Look out for Geeky going live. I don't know if they're going to be live just yet. And if they are already live by the time we finish here, then we can do a raid. The God of Small Things. I would love to read for a few minutes, but I just want to say that eventually what we're all fighting for is not some new ideology, ironclad, to replace the old one, but a different way of looking at the world. And for that, literature and music and painting are so important. I'm going to read you a part of The God of Small Things where everybody has a problem with classification, which is a problem that I frequently have. And let me tell you before I start reading this part, The God of Small Things is my favorite fiction. That's not fantasy. From the dining room window where she stood, with the wind in her hair, Rahel could see the rain drum down on the rusted tin roof of what used to be their grandmother's pickle factory. Paradise Pickles and Preserves. It lay between the house and the river. They used to make pickles, squashes, jams, curry powders, and canned pineapples, and banana jam illegally, for the Food Products Organization banned it, because according to their specifications, it was neither jam nor jelly. Too thin for jelly and too thick for jam. An ambiguous, unclassifiable consistency, they said, as per their books. Looking back now, France is out. Yes. Looking back now, to Rahel, it seems as though this difficulty that their family had with classification ran much deeper than the jam-jelly question. Perhaps Ammu, Esther, and she were the worst transgressors. But it wasn't just them. It was the others too. They all broke the rules. They all crossed into forbidden territory. They all tampered with the laws that lay down who should be loved and how much. The laws that make grandmothers, grandmothers, uncles, uncles, mothers, mothers, cousins, cousins, jam, jam, and jelly, jelly. It was a time when uncles became fathers, mothers, lovers, and cousins died and had funerals. It was a time when the unthinkable became thinkable and the impossible really happened. Even before Sophie Moll's funeral, the police found Veluta. His arms had goosebumps where the handcuffs touched his skin. Cold handcuffs with sour metal smell, like steel bus rails, and the smell of the bus conductor's hands from holding them. After it was all over, baby Kochama said, "As ye sow, so shall ye reap," as though she had said had nothing to do with the sowing and the reaping. She returned on her small feet to the cross-stitch embroidery. Her little toes never touched the floor. It was her idea that Esther be returned. Margaret Kochama's grief and bitterness as her daughter's death coiled inside her like an angry spring. She said nothing but slapped Esther wherever she could in the days she was there before she returned to England. Rahel watched Ammu pack Esther's little trunk. "Maybe they're right," Ammu's whisper said. "Maybe a boy does need a baba." Rahel saw that her eyes were redly dead. They consulted the twin expert in Hyderabad. She wrote to say that it was not advisable to separate monozygotic twins, but that two-egg twins were no different from ordinary siblings, and while they would certainly suffer the natural distress that children from broken homes underwent, it would be nothing more than that. Nothing out of the ordinary. And so Esther was returned in a train with his tin trunk and beige and pointy shoes rolled into his khaki hold-all. First class, overnight on a Madras rail to Madras, and then with a friend of their father's from Madras to Kolkata. He had a tiffin carrier with tomato sandwiches, an eagle flask with an eagle. He had terrible pictures in his head. Rain, rushing inky water, and smell, sick sweet, like old roses on a breeze. But worst of all, he carried inside him the memory of a young man with an old man's mouth. The memory of a swollen face and smashed upside-down smile, of a spreading pool of clear liquid with a bare bulb reflected in it, of a bloodshot eye that opened, wandered, and fixed its gaze on him. Esther. And what had Esther done? He had looked into that beloved face and said yes. Yes, it was him. In a purely practical sense, it would probably be correct to say it all began when Sophie Moll came to A&M. Perhaps it's true that things can change in a day, that a few dozen hours can affect the outcome of a whole lifetime. And when they do, those few dozen hours, like the salvaged remains of a burned house, the charred clock, the singed photograph, the scorched furniture, must be resurrected from the ruins and examined, preserved, accounted for. Little events, ordinary things, smashed and reconstituted, imbued with new meaning, suddenly they become the bleached bones of a story. Still, to say it all began when Sophie Moll came to A&M is only one way of looking at it. Equally, it could be argued that it actually began thousands of years ago, long before the Marxists came, before the British took Malabar, before the Dutch ascendancy, before Vasco da Gama arrived, before the Zamorins' conquest of Calicut. But before 3 purple-robed Syrian bishops murdered by the Portuguese were found floating in the sea, with coiled sea serpents riding on their chest and oysters knotted in their tangled beards. It could be argued that it began long before Christianity arrived in a boat and seeped into Kerala like tea from a tea bag. That it really began in the days when the love laws were made, the laws that lay down who should be loved and how much. And that is chapter 6. Any questions? All right. Going to remind you, I do have a large goal. Please, if you can, hit up that goal. That would be so helpful. Because, yeah, things. Things. I shall see you all tomorrow. And remember, just going to tell you all, remember to be kind. All the things. Just be kind. There's too much unkindness in this world. Just be kind. I shall see you all tomorrow for more Orientalism.